Two teams remain that each had a difficult run to get to this point, but are thoroughly deserving of making it to the final in Munich. You know, a lot of people didn't expect this final, this matchup. I didn't check all of the videos of predictions, etc., but I saw most people didn't agree with me that PSG and Inter would make it past Arsenal and Barcelona. But you guys let me know who else predicted that, because I'm very curious. But even if people didn't predict that, it doesn't mean they didn't want to see it, right? This should be a great final. Two excellent managers, very different styles, two serial winning teams in the last 5 years, well, over a decade for PSG, of course, but also two teams that have both made and lost the final in the last 5 years. Just like the semifinals, honestly, you could talk me into believing either side will take this one. That's how close I think it could be. So let's get into why I think that. And remember, guys, it's just my opinion. It's not what I want to happen, just a guess as to what could happen, okay? Honestly, this one stings a little to have to choose, as I've enjoyed watching both of these teams over the last few years for very differing reasons. All right, let's go into that. First of all, both of these sides, they've had very difficult paths to get here, which is part of the beauty of the new format in general, right? Because you get pot 1 teams playing against pot 1 teams, something we didn't see in the past in the Champions League. Inter had some strong teams in the league phase, starting with a draw away to City, who at the time, you got to remember, we didn't know that they would have such a brutal shit show implosion of a season. They still had Rodri at the time, right? They beat Arsenal as well and lost to Leverkusen. The rest were expected wins. PSG, on the other hand, had a horrible start to the season. I predicted back in September that they would make the final, and I thought it was yet another embarrassing call. Turned out to be right. Also had Sporting as the dark horses, but that was before Amorim left. But anyway, 3 losses in their opening 5 matches. 1 win, which was against Girona, thanks to a strange goal. It was really rough at the beginning. But things picked up for them in the new year, 2025, with that comeback from 2-0 down against Manchester City to win 4-2. And from there, they became the Premier League Reapers. They dominated Liverpool in Paris in a way Liverpool supporters hadn't seen in years, and still lost thanks to a rare moment that you could actually criticize Donnarumma in 2025. Then it was Aston Villa, which they almost threw away. We'll talk more on that recurring lapse they have. Then they beat Arsenal 3-1 on aggregate. Inter, they dealt with Feyenoord pretty easily, as you would expect, but Bayern really tested them. For all of the issues Bayern have had at times this season, they played very well against Inter Milan. And considering Inter had only conceded twice in the UCL prior to facing Bayern, then conceded more than that against the Bavarians, including 2 at home, very impressive from Bayern, a big scare. From there, though, they had an absolute shootout against FC Barcelona. They let a lead slip, then got back in it at the death, then made the most of their chance in extra time. For Inter, while they had sloppy moments against Barcelona, here's the first area where I see a difference between the two. You gotta act like you've been here before, right? And I'll say again, Inter weren't perfect against Barcelona. Jan Sommer was forced into putting on a masterclass after all, but where they showed their experience was how they weren't discouraged against Barcelona after going 1 down in the 87th minute. Yes, big mistakes from Barcelona. Yeah, where was everybody at a time like this, right? But it wasn't just the maturity that was impressive, but how they actually took their chances. They had about half of the shots as Barcelona, but were far more efficient with them. With PSG, they will create a ton of chances as well. They will dominate the game for long stretches, but they don't have a killer in the front line. Well, that's not necessarily fair. Dembele was a killer with his finishing for a while, but that's dropped off quite a bit of late as his form has dropped slightly due to a nagging injury. But the fact remains, they're not as cold-blooded in front of goal as Inter Milan has been. Look at the chances that a guy like Barcola had or Gonzalo Ramos against Arsenal. They will flub him. Another thing that I referenced earlier, and I've said a few times when analyzing them in this tournament, their youth is a double-edged sword. In fact, they are the antithesis of Inter in a way, aren't they? Their average age of their lineup is around 24 years old, Marquinhos and Fabian Ruiz being the old heads in there, and Ruiz just turned 29 last month. This sees PSG sometimes swing violently from being so in control of a match due to their youthful exuberance and skill, having a stranglehold on the opposition, great physically, to then looking absolutely frantic at the back and forcing Donnarumma into overtime work, making save of the season after save of the season contender. Now the thing is, this typically only happened when they had a lead on aggregate. Otherwise, they were in control. But that's their first big weakness. PSG's defense isn't bad at all. In fact, they are far better at defending than Barcelona are. Despite their fullbacks pushing up the pitch and joining the attack regularly, they are also very capable of sitting back a bit and defending a little deeper. However, as we saw against Aston Villa and a little bit against Arsenal, while their defending is good for the most part, you'll notice that they struggle with crosses into the box. Not necessarily from corners or from the touchline, but from early crosses from wide areas. That is absolutely an area where Inter's wide men like Di Marco and Dumfries will be able to hurt PSG if they can catch their fullbacks out a bit. Yes, João Neves does well to help cover the right flank or Inter's left. You'll frequently see him over there helping out Hakimi when needed. You'll see that dude everywhere, let's be honest. But yes, if they do catch them out, these low whipped in balls to Lautaro or Thuram could cause the backline some major issues, as I found that that's what they have struggled with the most against both Aston Villa and Arsenal. The expectation, however, will be that PSG mostly defend through attacking and possession, and that Inter will have to be on the back foot. That's the expectation. Now, of course, Inter have shown throughout the season that they are very competent defenders over the past few seasons. 1 goal conceded in the league phase, I mean, come on, insane record. However, where they were previously airtight, they have been conceding more and more as the season has gone on. This is a worry for Inter, coming up against a team that has been able to crack open everyone they've come up against. Bayern and Barcelona were cutting through their defense in the second leg for long stretches. We saw PSG rely on Donnarumma a bit. We saw Inter rely on Sommer a bit. But the difference was Inter had far more sustained pressure on them for long stretches against Barcelona and against Bayern as well. And so let's get into that, as defense and attack are related when analyzing these two teams, right? So against Barcelona, it's not that Rafinha wasn't a threat, because when it came to the final third and finishing chances, he was and always is, right? That's where he's the most dangerous this season. But so much of Barcelona's buildup in industry was through Lamine Yamal. Most of their attacking came through him down that right flank. He was both creating for his teammates and himself, and so Dumfries didn't have to defend as much against Rafinha as maybe he thought he would. He had that license to play a little bit higher up. That won't happen against PSG, where you need to be switched on with both flanks, as both sides are nasty. Kvara on the left against Dumfries, then take your pick of Barcola or Doué plus Dembele and Hakimi joining in on the fun on the right. Where they had Lamine to worry about on the right, they'll have a triple threat up against Inter's trio of Bastoni, Di Marco, and Mkhitaryan. So there will be two sides to deal with, as PSG have danger on both flanks. And then you have Dembele playing between the lines and sometimes dropping deep, sometimes popping up on the right, sometimes running in behind, all over the place. With how Inter has struggled to defend lately, I'd be a bit worried. And it's not just in the Champions League, but in Serie A, twice taking the lead against Lazio, twice letting them equalize. Also losing 3-0 to AC Milan in the Coppa Italia. But let's get to how they hurt PSG. As we mentioned, kind of. Inter's danger all came down the right-hand side, with Denzel Dumfries being involved in 5 of Inter's 6 goals against Barcelona. This was a dissection of Barcelona's weakness, as without Balde, their back line has been horrible, with it constantly looking out of whack, the high line looking disjointed towards the end of the season here. They did brilliantly to exploit that, and Dumfries put in 2 performances against Barcelona that will not be forgotten, right? He was 1 goal contribution away from matching Del Piero's record of being involved in 6 goals in a Champions League semi-final. On top of that, as mentioned, Inter have guys that can put in great balls from wide areas on that left flank. Looking at Di Marco, looking at Bastoni as well, and from corners, Inter will provide a lot of issues for PSG, as they absolutely are a bigger team than them. Inter will always be favorites to win aerial battles, as it's basically Willian Pacho and Marquinhos versus the world. And Inter scored from a few corners. Against Bayern, they scored twice from corners, and once against Barcelona. Having said that, PSG didn't concede from any corners or set pieces in the knockout rounds thus far, so I'm basing that danger more on Inter's proficiency and physical advantage versus this being a weakness necessarily for PSG, as it hasn't really been so far. I think that Nuno Mendes, people are going to say I'm biased, but I think that Nuno Mendes has shown that he's pretty damn good when it comes to defending. He did have some struggles against Saka at times, but for the most part, he did really well against Mohamed Salah, let's remember that. But I think for the most part, he's been pretty good. In the second leg against Arsenal, Achraf Hakimi looked a little bit shaky defensively. And I do wonder if that, that trio I was talking about, Di Marco, Bastoni, Mkhitaryan, as well as Lautaro Martinez sort of floating over to the left as he tends to do, I do wonder if they'll try to focus on that side of things, because Achraf Hakimi has been dynamite going forward, but it does look like there could potentially be a weakness defensively. And in mentioning him, also, obviously, Inter have a very special player in the attack in Lautaro Martinez, someone who can finish off chances that your average player can't, and who has a great partnership with Thuram. Both of them have looked a bit spent lately. Martinez was playing through the pain against Barcelona, and at the time of recording this, it does seem he is focusing on returning for the final against PSG. He may feature in tomorrow's match against Como. That's a big match. Can't wait to see that. But he hasn't played since Barcelona. So, what do you make of all of this? For me, the less fancied team is probably Inter, given how leaky they have been in recent weeks and how key players have been drained physically, such as Barella and Lautaro. When they needed big performances in the Champions League, they got them. When they needed them in Serie A and the Coppa Italia, they didn't get them. But that's another thing. The midfield battle will be fascinating, won't it? The experience of Mkhitaryan, Çalhanoğlu, and the skill of Barella versus a very press-resistant Vitinha and João Neves, a guy who pops up everywhere. Really looking forward to that, plus Fabian Ruiz. Looking forward to that battle, just as I was looking forward to Barcelona's midfield against Inter's, and that was fun to watch. But anyway, you talk about experience in big games like this, and PSG haven't been here before. You can't say they have, as the lone representative from the 2020 final is Marquinhos. Kimpembe is still a part of PSG technically, but it feels mostly like in spirit these days as he's eternally injured, the poor guy. Just an absolute nightmare. On the other side of the coin, Inter Milan's starting 11 from 2 years ago against Manchester City is virtually the same as it is now. Swap out Dzeko for Thuram, swap out Brozovic for Mkhitaryan, and Onana for Sommer. But otherwise, it's the same group of guys. So yeah, they say that you have to lose one in order to win one. Both have lost one. But this is a completely different PSG side. So it's a point to Inter as far as living that experience already, and just in general, being far more experienced. I think that Inter will definitely score from a corner or from one of those whipped in balls from the wide areas, but I do think PSG will score more, as their attack is just irresistible at the moment. I don't see it being a blowout at all, something close to a 2-1 win for PSG, going 2-0 up, something like that. But I do see PSG taking advantage of Inter's creaky defense of late. I just think that without that obvious deficiency, as Barcelona had on their left side and Inter exploited greatly, I think that defensively, Luis Enrique organizes this PSG team really, really well. And given how potent they are in the attack and how Inter have been struggling defensively at times this season, it tips the scales in PSG's favor. Now, regardless of what happens, I just hope for a good final. Finals often suck, but hopefully this final will mirror the rest of the competition as far as, the drama and the goals have been concerned. That is my big wish. But guys, that's just my take on things. Drop all of your thoughts below, and hey, enjoy the final. I'll certainly upload my take on everything that happens in Munich after the match, as always. All right, guys? Later.